Honestly, there are so many grotesquely fucked up things it's hard to pick just one. What's the most fucked up thing the US government has done? The Trail of Tears is pretty up there for most fucked up thing. Yes, I know slavery happened, I'm not arguing that this was worse, I just named the first thing that popped into my head. Back in the 50s and 60s, the US military tested several different biological weapons on and unbeknownst to the public. They specifically targeted low-income and poverty-stricken areas. They tested things from chemicals to viruses. It wasn't declassified till 10 years ago. Why would they declassify it? Freedom of Information Act required them to disclose this. For years, so many people were arrested, disappeared and even dismissed as conspiracy theorists through this. I can also say that chemtrails aren't a thing. I work aerospace and the altitude that these planes are flying wouldn't do anything. Planes would be flying much lower like crop dusters in order to make any effect. It's literally vapor and exhaust coming from the planes, and some stay longer because of the different altitudes, temps and RH that they are flying. Sandy Creek Massacre? 500 Colorado cavalry were sent to track down natives that were attacking settlers, for good reason, but that is a long story. They ended up coming to a Cheyenne village that was known to be peaceful. Its leader, Black Kettle, was a voice of peace for the natives and had even gone to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Lincoln and negotiate a lasting peace between Americans and Cheyenne. Lincoln gave him an American flag and told him that so long as it flew in their camp, no American would harm them. Anyways, this asshole Shivington was leading the cavalry and saw it as some kind of noble duty. After months of searching for aggressive natives and coming up empty-handed, the government ordered him to disband his force and go home. Shivington, now faced with the prospect of his crusade being an embarrassment, decided to attack Black Kettle's village, basically just to say he did something. The Colorado cavalry attacked in the middle of the night in mid-November, while everyone was sleeping. Eyewitness accounts are terrifying, and basically, women, children, and men were run down as they tried desperately to flee across a frozen river. Black Kettle ran into the middle of the battle waving the American flag and screaming that they were friends of America, but the Americans turned on him and he was forced to drop the flag and flee as well. The fact that Black Kettle survived is miraculous, but most of his clan did not, and the few that survived the battle mostly died of hypothermia and starvation from literally fleeing through a frozen river in the middle of the night. Cavalrymen raped live and dead women, including children, and cut off male and female genitals and strapped them to their horses as decorations. Black Kettle and what remained of his clan ended up getting sent to a reservation, where they mostly starved to death, and Black Kettle gave up on peace as the younger generation flocked to warlords like Roman Nose and Crazy Horse. This ended up contributing to Red Cloud's War, as did most of the other atrocities in the West. Oh, also Shivington was known to have said, "Nits make lice," a statement that referred to his campaign of exterminating native children along with everyone else. Oh, and I'm pretty sure Colorado nearly elected him governor after all of this anyways. There was the time the National Guard shot and killed coal miners and their families who were being horribly exploited by coal companies, so they were striking. See also, the Ludlow Massacre. And the time they decided to routinely sterilize Native American women. And the Guatemala syphilis experiments. The silencing, embarrassing, and killing of Gary Webb. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist who proved that the CIA was selling massive amounts of drugs, particularly cocaine, to typically black, poor neighborhoods all over the U.S. This was in order to fund an overthrow of the Nicaraguan government by U.S.-friendly terrorists during the 90s. He was forced to resign, disgraced, blacklisted, divorced, and found dead with 2 bullets through his head in 2004. It was ruled a suicide despite the facts he owned no guns, and it being 2 bullets through the head and a suicide. Well, this probably isn't the worst thing America has done since it didn't happen, but Operation Northwoods. This was a proposed false flag attack on U.S. soil that would justify going to war with Cuba. It was rejected by Kennedy but approved by every man before him. It's stuff like this that makes the whole 9/11 inside job conspiracy sound a little less wacky, because this was essentially the same thing. We overthrew a democratically elected government in Iran when the people didn't vote for who we wanted. Down with the military-industrial complex. Great nations don't fight endless wars. Currently, they are abusing the fact that the whole population is tunnel visioning on the corona pandemic to pass a highly controversial bill, that will grant them access to every single phone call or message passed/sent/received on American soil, without warrant or court order. The things they haven't been caught for. MK Ultra is what I came to this thread to see. Anybody who has had a profoundly bad trip knows that testing large doses of LSD on random people without their knowledge is a really fucked up thing to do. So I actually took a class on this, and wanted to chime in to refute some of this stuff, not because it's any less horrible, but because the reality is, to me, more horrible. The study involved 600 black men, about half of them with syphilis and half without. Over the course of the study, some became sick and moved from the healthy group to the ill group. None of the men were deliberately exposed to syphilis. This info has probably been mixed up with another study, the Guatemala syphilis study, which was architected by John Cutler, who also participated in the Tuskegee study, leading to the misconception. Also, the GSS was a horrible, massively messed up study and at a dark time in US research. If you want to get extremely angry, check it out, and then if you want to feel like breaking things, read about Madrigal v. Quilligan. Man. My blood is actively boiling. What actually happened in the Tuskegee study was that a number of men were selected in an area that was known for high rates of syphilis, and were told by the US government that they would receive treatment for their bad blood, a euphemism for syphilis. They were coerced into the study through offerings of meager reward for participation, including a burial paid for by the government and a few hot meals. They did, actually, receive what they thought was treatment. They went into the doctor, they had tests done as well as invasive spinal taps, they were given creams and ointments that have limited treatment helpfulness. However, as you can probably guess, none of these things were particularly effective, and some did nothing at all. In actuality, they were being studied for the progression of the disease, as the prevailing theory was that it affected black and white people differently. Spoiler, it didn't. This charade went on for 40 years. Over that time, penicillin, an effective treatment for syphilis, became widespread, but the doctors kept them from that treatment deliberately, even going so far as to bar the men from participating in armed forces because the army would have given them access to penicillin and the better treatments of the day. In this time period, the study was not, technically, a secret. Multiple scientific journal articles commenting on various findings were published publicly. Clearly, the CDC didn't think they were doing anything wrong. Some doctors spoke out, but it wasn't until Peter Buxton, among others, although he was the most effective, a relatively new hire at the CDC, blew the whistle from the inside that the entire thing stopped. Even then, it took Buxton 4 years, 1968 to 1972, to bring about the study's end, and he had to take the information to the press to actually halt it for real. The men themselves, for the most part, got very little by way of apology. They were given small amounts of money and a formal apology by President Clinton. The whole thing is pretty well buried now and is barely talked about in school and in history classes. I think it's important that the full scope of the tragedy that was this period of US history is talked about. I think it's important that the real, accurate facts are known. The event itself was so incredibly horrible. I think we owe it to those men to remember exactly what happened to them, exactly as it did. They were lied to and manipulated and used in the worst of ways, and they deserve their story to be told in full as loudly and as long as it can be. Hard to rank them, but the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a US false flag operation to establish the pretext to invade Vietnam to stop the spread of communism, leading to the absolutely useless deaths of millions of military and civilians only to have the US pull out and cede control of the entire country to communist control. The most fucked up thing about it is that our government knew it was an unwinnable war, but we stayed there anyway, throwing more bodies on the pile. The news media kept a daily running count of the US dead. The US government measured success in terms of a number of enemy dead. MK Ultra staging coups on democratic governments because they had oppositional ideologies. There is literally an entire wiki page on the US staged coups. Allowing one of its own town's water supply to be poisoned for financial benefit. Appointing family to senior government positions. Agent Orange declaring war on a nation based on a false pretense of fighting terror, while doing nothing to the actual country that orchestrated the attack. At the same time, dragging other nations into this war and tearing relations with them, for example France, whom you would not exist without, because they didn't want to be involved, and then causing such instability that massive terrorist organizations blossomed out of it, then patting ourselves on the back for fixing a problem that the US started in the first place, except the issue is not even 100% fixed. Refusal to condemn terrorism from a particular viewpoint in order to protect your voter base. Denying their own citizens accessible healthcare, claiming it is something only people lucky or wealthy enough should have, but making weapons considered a basic right. Smallpox blankets. Literally having a civil war over slavery and being one of the last Western nations to make it unlawful. Systematic racial segregation to the point of drinking fountains, buses, laundromats not even allowing them to walk through the same door, while simultaneously denying that this may have had a negative effect on huge swaths of these groups on a socio-economic level well into modern times, while also denying ongoing racism despite the fact that a huge chunk of the modern population was alive and well during those times of segregation, and had no issue with it. Allowing large corporations to legally bribe politicians for outcomes that are unhealthy for the nation as a whole. Systematic pedophilia in the entertainment and business industries, and probably a lot more that was just not discovered yet. Allowing a media organization to publish and broadcast false information because the organization won with an argument claiming that their news was for entertainment and not for being factual, and making shit up was more entertaining to the audiences. I don't know, maybe some other shit, some details may be wrong, but I'll find links in the morning. The Diego Garcia incident in 1968, which is also one of the worst things the UK government has done. For the UK to continue purchasing nuclear missiles from America, they asked to rent out the British island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to use as a naval base. The UK then subsequently sent soldiers onto the island, forced all of the inhabitants off of the island, killed anybody who resisted, destroyed all homes and killed all the animals so US soldiers could then turn the island into a naval base. Any ex-inhabitants who tried to speak out about the incident were immediately silenced and punished, and the details of the incident were only recently made public. The island is still a joint UK/US naval base to this day. I think the CIA raping and torturing US citizens is up there. They also imported and distributed drugs to Black and Mexican neighborhoods. The tests they did on people are known as MK Ultra, I'm pretty sure. The government also made an agreement with Japan to not hold them accountable for their crimes against humanity if Japan gave the US the results of their horrible experiments. Japan raped and tortured their own citizens, but the level of cruelty was beyond imagination. Surgeries are done without anesthesia, weapons testing on live subjects, dipping someone's limbs into nitrogen oxide and smashing it while they were awake. This was called Unit 731. Many presidents have ordered the military to commit crimes against humanity too. Obama ordered a drone and airstrike on a hospital full of innocent people and so many people died. If there's worse than that, I'm not sure I want to know. The 9/11 shit is a conspiracy, as far as I know, not something concrete. Hospital airstrike. On October 3, 2015, a United States Air Force AC-130U gunship attacked the Kunduz Trauma Center operated by Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders in the city of Kunduz, in the province of the same name in northern Afghanistan. It has been reported that at least 42 people were killed and over 30 were injured. The incessant need to overthrow democratically elected socialist leaders and/or assassinating them and then planting fascist dictators in their place. Victims: Salvador Allende, murdered by the US-backed coup in Chile. Patrice Lumumba, assassinated by CIA in DRC. Thomas Sankara, murdered by US and French-backed coup in Burkina Faso. Jean-Bertrand Aristide, ousted by the US-backed coup in Haiti. Anyone care to add to the list? There's lots more, I'm sure. And the US literally invaded the tiny island of Grenada in the Caribbean to take down a socialist government. Sad. Honestly, there are so many grotesquely fucked up things it's hard to pick just one. Not to mention there's so much that's classified, that honestly, we don't know for sure. The thread is bound to mention stuff like slavery, Tuskegee, MK Ultra, Trail of Tears, Iran-Contra, Jim Crow laws, Vietnam War, voter suppression, Operation Northwoods, the Patriot Act, pretending COVID-19 is a hoax to short stock, bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, executing mentally disabled criminals, and the list just goes on and on and on. How do you pick a most fucked up thing? Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.